Coming in at a weight of 300 pounds and covering just a few square inches. No, I'm not talking about the speaker, I'm talking about the book. This is David Coleman, the author of the Sybex CWNA study guide. And he's coming to talk to you about an old security thing that's still an important security thing in resurgence. And so he's going to talk to you about WIPs in Wi-Fi security.
Hi, everybody. My name is David Coleman with Extreme Networks. Thanks for having me here today to talk about this topic. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen. And here we go. So we're here to talk about wireless intrusion prevention systems, WIPs. WIPs has actually been around for wireless security monitoring and deterrent for now about 19 years. But it's kind of taken a back seat in recent years. So the purpose of this presentation is to try to highlight and put more of an emphasis back on WIPs, and like I like to call it, the rediscovered wireless security component. So we'll go ahead and get started. Once again, my name is David Coleman. I'm Director of Product Marketing at Extreme Networks. Some of you might know me as Certified Wireless Network Expert number 4. I'm also available, reachable at Twitter at Mr. Multipath. Please follow me if you're not already. You might also know me about a lot of the books that I've co-authored. I've been writing Wi-Fi books for many, many years, including study guides for this program. And this big fat book on wireless security, the CWSP Wireless Security Professional Study Guide. So my co-author and I wrote this book about wireless security, 802.1x, encryption, and many, many chapters, but we dedicated 4 chapters specifically to wireless attacks and WIPs because of how important it is as part of your overall wireless security strategy. That being said, WIPs, unfortunately, over the years is taking a back seat because everybody just kind of doesn't really think about it anymore. And there's probably a lot of reasons why. You know, in the early days of Wi-Fi, WIPs, wireless was completely unsecure. And that's when WIPs, you know, first made its debut. But wireless security has gotten better. We had WPA back in 2004 and 5, we got WPA2, and you've recently heard about WPA3. And if implemented properly, although nothing's perfect, but if implemented properly with proper authentication encryption, you can secure your wireless networks. That being said, WIPs is, as I said, people have kind of just forgotten about it in a lot of cases because everybody has one, and it's almost become a Me Too RFP checkbox. And you know, we shouldn't be thinking about WIPs that way because the threats still exist. That all the threats that WIPs detect, they're still around and still need to be monitored for a possible detection and elimination by a good WIPs solution. That being said, the bad guys, new threats are developing all the time. So in addition to the ones that have been around for a long time that we'll talk about, new ones are always popping up. You know, always remember that Wi-Fi is an access technology, right? And think about what the definition of an access point is. It is a portal into your corporate network, right? Your wired backbone. And it's your job to protect that portal with proper authentication solutions, but also monitor it for potential threats and penetration from it, either intentional or unintentional. And the bad guys aren't going to stop. So especially with the advent of IoT, there's all of these new potential holes and openings into your corporate network. And that's another reason WIPs, IoT is making WIPs even more and more important. And also the advent of cloud technology is really going to change WIPs. And we'll talk more about that in the coming, later on in this presentation. So how did WIPs get started? Let's talk about it historically and also talk about it architecturally. In the early days of Wi-Fi was not secure, and a lot of people didn't have Wi-Fi at their office. So there's a concept called the consumerization of IT, where people try technology out at home first, and then they bring it into work. And you know what that is? The rogue AP. So what happened is people had Wi-Fi at home, they loved it, but they didn't have it at work. They went to their administrator and said, I want the Wi-Fi. And the administrator said, no, unsecured, not going to do it. So guess what the employee did? They went to Best Buy, they bought a Linksys or a D-Link, they plugged it in at work, instant Wi-Fi, but then they had an unauthorized and unsecured gateway straight into the corporate wired infrastructure that the company wants to protect. And typically the employee didn't know the consequences of their actions. So in the early days, WIPs was developed simply for rogue APs. And still to this day, that remains the #1 thing that people talk about when they talk about WIPs is the detection of rogue APs. And we're going to talk about some of the different detection methods and also mitigation. I want you to notice on the slide right here what my icon is for the rogue AP. It's the skull and crossbones. Everybody knows that the skull and crossbones is the international symbol for pirates. It is also the international symbol for rogue access points, so keep that in mind. So let's talk a little about the architecture. Today, most people have what is called an integrated WIPs architecture. And what I mean by that is maybe the actual server solution or software is integrated into a network management platform or is integrated into a controller. But even more importantly, they're not using an overlay sensors, and they're using APs as part-time sensors and part-time scanning for potential attacks. And every wireless vendor has some sort of RRM mechanism for adaptive RF capabilities. But when they do the off-channel scanning while providing access as well, they can also basically be part-time WIP sensors. Of course, you can also, most vendors give you the capability to turn an AP into a full-time sensor as well, but most people aren't willing to pay for that. So that's why most people have gone for kind of the integrated model. The problem too about the integrated model is everybody and their brother now has just put like some sort of WIPs capability into their networking management platform. And very often it's just kind of an afterthought and it's not best of breed. Now, in the early days of WIPs is you basically just had standalone sensors that were full-time monitoring devices for both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz bands. And you may or may not have had wireless, but you had the sensors to detect for rogue APs, and then you had some sort of ratios. Problem is most people don't want to pay for the extra sensors, whether it's overlay or just converting an access point into a full-time sensor, because it's more hardware and it's more money. And that's another reason that WIPs has kind of been pushed to the side, is people don't want to pay for the dedicated sensors. For the verticals that do pay for it, and there are verticals that will, federal government will pay for it, sometimes state government, big box retail will pay for full-time sensors, so will healthcare and big box hospitals as well, and also finance and banking industries are willing to spend the extra money very often for the additional sensor devices. But once again, not only is the extra cost, but you also have, it means more time for actually deploying and hanging the extra sensors. Depending on the vertical and depending on the wireless network you have, there's different ratios. You might have one dedicated sensor for every 4 or 5 APs. I believe the Department of Defense mandates a ratio of like 1 to 3. Now, which is better? Is it going to be a full-time sensor or a part-time sensor? And in most cases, a lot of people, some cases, people will use combinations of the two. That being said, nothing beats a full-time sensor. You want radios monitoring all the time. But as I mentioned, the deployment costs as well as the hardware costs makes this prohibitive a lot of times, and people just don't want to pay for it. Thus, they go for the part-time sensors. Good news is there's an option now that a lot of vendors are moving towards, and that's the third radio. So I work for Extreme Networks. This is our AP410C, and it has 3 radios in it. It has a 2.4 gigahertz radio to provide access for clients, and also a 5 gigahertz 3x3 radio. They're both, or excuse me, 4x4 radios. But additionally, we have a third radio that is 2x2x2, and it is a full-time sensor. Now, we're not the only vendor that does this. Other people do this, but this is actually a really good strategy because effectively you're putting a WIP sensor, full-time sensor, in every AP. Okay, and without the extra cost for actually deploying the extra devices in the ceiling, as well as the extra hardware costs. So this is the third radio sensor. It's been around for a while for a lot of different vendors, but it's going to make WIPs more prevalent moving forward. It'll be the model, the hardware model. Now, let's get back to rogue APs again. So when you talk about rogue APs, typically a rogue AP is defined as a device that is unauthorized device that's plugged into your corporate network, into your wired network. And there has to be classification methods. So you need to, is it an authorized device? Is it an unauthorized device that's not plugged into the network? Or is it actually unauthorized rogue device plugged into our network? Not all WIPs vendors are equal, okay? Some are better at classification than others, and some do auto classification where they can look at a variety of variables, including authentication, encryption, and SSIDs, and so on. So that being said, you absolutely need a way to detect if devices are plugged into your wired network, and vendors have a lot of different ways of doing them. Some are published, a lot aren't published, a lot are secret sauce, okay? I'm just gonna cover a few of these here, and none of these are nothing new. A lot of these have been around for a long time, but different ways for detect if an unauthorized, like Linksys device is plugged into your corporate network is one as simple as this. You could see some known broadcast traffic for, say, from a core router MAC address that is being broadcasted out on a wireless side from some unauthorized APs that are not part of your APs. And if you see that from a broadcast out, very specific type of broadcast traffic, you can classify that device as a rogue. They can get more complex. You could be doing a comparison of wired side and wired MAC addresses. So here we have a rogue AP plugged into the accessor switch and a rogue client connected to it. The rogue AP's wired device is going to send out some type of broadcast traffic like an ARP on the wired side. It'll propagate into your switch fabric and it'll find its way down to your APs or sensors. And then you can start building a wired side MAC table that has been discovered. Additionally, you're going to hear BSSIDs of unauthorized APs and our rogue APs. And by then, after that, it's simply just a comparison. And if you're doing a comparison of the wireless and wired MAC addresses, and why would you do this? Is most vendors, like say a D-Link, what they'll do is they'll increment the MAC addresses of what they have on the wired NIC card and the wireless NIC card. And by doing a comparison to some sort of range, you see it, the traffic on both sides, you can classify a device as a rogue. Now, any vendor that does rogue detection that uses a combination of wireless and wired side detection, very often you're going to need to also trunk any wired VLANs down to the sensor, not just the wireless user VLANs. And the reason for that is and this is what a lot of people don't think about, is that you might have a switch port that's dedicated with a VLAN specific for wired user traffic, but somebody could then plug in an unauthorized access point into that. So that's why it's a good idea for, if you're going to do this combo of wired and wireless side detection, to also trunk any wired user VLANs at the edge of your network down to the sensors as well. There's other methods of rogue detection. We don't have time to cover them all, and like I said, a lot of them are top secret. But this is an old one where a sensor can actually go into an active mode and become a client, connect to a unknown wireless device, and then try to send traffic through it, like a ping, and try to send it to the WIP server. And if it's successful of doing that, then it's classified as a rogue device. Now, obviously, this means no encryption, and because if it's encrypted, you can't connect to it. But remember, who puts in most rogue APs? Very often it's employees, and a lot of times they're not using encryption. But if the encryption is being used, obviously this method won't work. Some are proprietary. So this is one vendor, they actually use marker packets. So what this vendor does is they have their sensor on the wired side send broadcast out a marker packet that has a very specific signature in it. Then the wireless rogue device, excuse me, will broadcast that out in the air, and if it's detected on the wireless side by the sensor device, it sent that it was the originator of that packet, and then it sees it through an unauthorized device and it classifies it as a rogue. So as I said, some of these methods are proprietary and some are not even known or even published. A lot of different ways. I know that my company, we use multiple ways for wired side and wireless detection. We publish some we don't. Of course, once a rogue device has been detected, do you mitigate it? So the best thing to do is triangulate on the device and then get rid of it, right? Or maybe unplug it from the wired network for a while and see who comes to try to find the thing, and then you found the person who put it in. But you can use mitigation, and all mitigation is taking an old, well-known established layer 2 denial of service attack and turning it into a countermeasure by spoofing deauthentication frames. And it's basically a two-way spoof where you're spoofing the MAC address of the rogue AP as maybe also the MAC address of the rogue clients. Then you have the sensor send out these spoofed management frames, deauth frames, and it effectively keeps knocking off the clients from the rogue AP and making it unusable. There's nothing new about this. Every vendor does this. It's been around forever. The problem is it's kind of a gray area of the law. You only want to make sure you use mitigation if the device is actually plugged into your network. If you're mitigating people just for the fun of it, you're technically breaking federal law in the United States. So you got to be careful with that. You know, different vendors, they offer either automatic mitigation or manual mitigation. Depending on the customer and the situation, manual mitigation might be better as opposed to automatic. But I can tell you that we have a lot of very large customers that are confident in our solution that they use the automatic mitigation as a temporarily stopgap to disable the rogue AP, and then they can go and triangulate on it and pull it out. Another method is also switch port suppression too, by if you can detect where what switch port the rogue AP is plugged in, you can send an SNMP trap down to that switch port and turn it off and effectively deny the AP. Now, there's other attacks as well. Ad hoc mitigation has always been a useful one. Because ad hoc networks are bad. You don't see them as much anymore, but in the early days of Wi-Fi, you saw it quite a bit in laptops where they had wired and wireless interfaces, and they'd be bridged together, and then they plug the laptop into the corporate network, and now you effectively turned a laptop into a rogue AP. So ad hoc has always been a huge security risk. Good WIPs will be able to detect it and mitigate it. The good news is that ad hoc isn't near as common anymore. Most devices, including mobile devices, don't even offer ad hoc capabilities anymore because they don't have a wired networking card. That being said, an attack that's kind of replaced this a lot, even though it's not opening up a hole into your corporate network, but it's opening up a third gateway, another gateway, unauthorized gateway, is the hotspots. So you have the hotspot capabilities in the phones, and a lot of people, like kids, will come into school and they'll turn those on, and they're supposed to be taking a test. Instead, they're offering hotspot access to their friends. Better best-of-breed WIPs now will detect hotspots and also help you mitigate them in some cases. So there's lots of attacks. We focus on rogue, and that's the one that gets the most press, but how about all the denial of service attacks? There's literally about 200 layer 2 denial of service attacks. It's by manipulating and different management and control frames. The most common ones are using deauthentication or disassociation frames. These can all be very easily detected. That being said, there's now protection against a lot of these attacks. Management frame protection, as defined by 802.11w, is finally starting to find its way into clients and is actually becoming more commonly used. WPA3 actually mandates the use of management frame protection. So that'll protect you from a lot of those attacks. But that being said, MFP is overrated in some ways because it doesn't protect against all layer 2 denial of service attacks. I mentioned there's hundreds of them. It protects against some of the more common ones. So you still need to be able to detect those to make sure that nobody is doing a layer 2 denial of service. And by the way, there's also layer 1 denial of service. Anybody and their brother that has an RF jammer can come into your and turn it on, and they can cause a complete denial of service. So not all WIPs have spectrum analysis capabilities built into them. You need spectrum analysis capabilities if you're going to be able to detect a layer 1 denial of service attack. Of course, one of my favorite attacks is this one that's been around for years, and there's been different iterations of it over the years too. And that's the wireless hijacking attack. And you see this happen at places like coffee shops and places like that have open networks. And basically the bad guy brings in a laptop that has a wireless AP built into the, using the radio of the laptop. And it basically is an evil twin of whatever the coffee shop SSID is. And then they hijack the connection by using either a jammer or a layer 2 attack and force clients at the coffee shop to attack to the evil twin. And then they also hand them out an IP address, and boom, they got them. They've hijacked them. This attack can evolve into other things. It can turn into a man-in-the-middle attack and also Wi-Fi phishing attacks. The good news is proper authentication helps prevent this. Additionally, any good WIPS is going to be able to detect those. What a WIPS won't detect is social engineering attacks. And social engineering attacks are actually usually the biggest problem. People are always the weakest link for wireless security, or any kind of security for that matter. The only thing that will prevent social engineering is proper training of your employees. Now, quick plug for my company. I came over to Extreme in the Aerohive acquisition a year ago, and I was absolutely ecstatic to be reminded that part of their portfolio was the best of breed WIP solution, air defense. I like to call it Extreme's hidden wireless and security jewel. I used to do work with air defense many, many years ago when they were a standalone company, and there's not a better WIPs out there. So I'm very, very excited to be a part of that. And where I'm getting at is not all WIPs are created equal. I'd like to think that my company has the best one out there, but there's other good ones as well. What I want to talk about the next few minutes are some of the things that any good WIPs should have. So any good WIPs is going to do signature analysis, and they're going to look at various frame patterns and changes in frames and create signatures to detect attacks or intrusions. Air defense that my company has well over in excess of 200 signatures. I said not all WIPs are created equal. Some of the Me Too WIP solutions that are out there might only have 20 or 30 signatures, okay? And that's not adequate enough. So having a huge signature database for any WIPs solution is important. Of course, you very often with these signature attacks, you can set alarm thresholds, can be defined specifically for each attack. Another big thing in a good WIP solution, best of breed, is going to be behavioral threat analysis, or threat analysis or behavior analysis, and specifically looking for patterns that deviate from normal wireless activity. And you're looking for anomalies based on historic metrics, and being able to have that kind of analysis is going to give you better security. That's why cloud is going to make WIPs a lot better, because cloud offers data, a lot better data analytics, better access to more data, and also, I know it's an overused term, but machine learning. So that's where cloud is really going to be provide a renaissance in my mind in terms of what we can detect for WIP security. You know, protocol analysis could be part of WIPs as well. In remote packet captures, about every vendor has this now. Remote packet captures are also used for troubleshooting capabilities as well, but they can also be used for wireless security analysis. Of course, you want alarms, right? So you need alarms that can be generated based on thresholds very often on these different signatures. So these alarms are triggered by signature analysis, spectrum analysis, behavioral analysis, even performance analysis can trigger these alarms. You should also be able to get it sent, an alarm sent via SMS or a text message or email to you as an administrator. And a good best of breed WIPS is also going to have a very detailed description of what the individual alarms and attacks are, as well as suggestions on how you can mitigate and rectify the situation. Just as important in a good modern day WIPS moving forward is forensic analysis. And what I mean by that is for an administrator to retrace the actions of any single wireless LAN device down to the minute. In other words, a timeline. And once again, this is providing this kind of security forensic analysis is where cloud is really going to change the game. My company offers a cloud management solution, and we recently announced unlimited data availability, and then be able to have a timeline. Literally, you could go back years, and be able to provide that to keep an audit trail is going to be important. You know, penetration testing is fun. If anybody doesn't own a Wi-Fi Pineapple, they just came out with their new model, the Mark IV. Or Mark 7, don't know the model number, just came in the mail today. It's great for doing penetration testing and auditing, not just of your wireless network, but also of your WIPS solution. You can perform some of these attacks internally and see if your WIPS is actually detecting them. A good WIPS solution will be able to take advantage of that and provide compliance reporting. So that's just as important. A good WIPS solution now will do its own internal auditing overlaid on top of your wireless network and create reports and suggestions on how you become compliant if any kind of holes are found. And this is also useful if you have to abide by HIPAA and PCI and all the other industry regulations these days. So this is quite useful with WIPS. Number one problem with WIPS is false positives. That being said, this is getting better year over year, and cloud is also going to make this better because with machine learning, we can weed out a lot of the false positives. Now let's talk about some things that are changing the game now that we need to be thinking about from a wireless security thing. And you've probably heard a lot this past week about iOS 14 and their move to more enhanced randomized MAC capabilities. Now, it's not as bad as we thought it was going to be. Initially, we thought it was going to be a randomized MAC every 24 hours. Instead, they're doing it a different randomized MAC per SSID. But MAC randomization for privacy purposes has its reasons, but it also causes potential threats as well. The good news is my company, we recently announced in air defense the capability to detect MAC randomization, provide visibility for that as well. This will also be maybe important in the future as we maybe start integrating WIP solutions together with NAC solutions for management as well. This is the big one. This is why we really need to be putting WIPs back in the forefront of our brains, and that IoT is the new security frontier. Why you've all probably heard about the aquarium that thermometer that was hacked into at a Las Vegas casino. That went through an IoT device in an aquarium. So Wi-Fi is in a lot of IoT devices. They're typically not secured very well, and they are now potential entry points into your network. And we really need enhanced monitoring of IoT capabilities. And it's not just Wi-Fi. It's also other types of RF, including Bluetooth and Zigbee. Proud to announce that we have recently built into air defense our BLE detection of a lot of the known BLE threats, and we'll be building in a lot more IoT monitoring capabilities moving forward. Here's something you need to think about. 6 gigahertz is coming. We're all excited about it as a new access technology, but guess what? Not everybody's going to deploy it a lot of way, but what's to prevent an attacker from buying a brand new 6 gigahertz AP and plugging it into your network? Depending on your WIP solution, it might not be detected. And the reason is that the radios in your WIP solution only are listening to 2.45. So when we think about 6 gigahertz, we not just need to think about all the new design aspects, we're gonna have to think about it from a security and a WIPS perspective as well. There's a whole new frequency band that might be a potential hole into your network. And cloud really changes the game. Cloud changes the game because you have global monitoring of WIPS devices. You have APs and switches that provide wireless and wireless threat monitoring for APs and switches from the cloud, from that single pane of glass. But the most important thing is the data. Being able to access all the data and providing machine learning threat enhancements of anomaly detection. My company, we take in 1 terabyte of data per second. The amount of data that we take in is mind-boggling, and being able to run in algorithms on that is going to only make anomaly detection and threat assessment even better. So cloud really changes the game for WIPS. And with that, I'm very happy to announce available starting this week. We've moved air defense, many of the components into the cloud, into Extreme Cloud IQ with Air Defense Essentials. It is not an extra charge. It just comes with your normal license. So this is a little bit of a shameless plug, but we're very excited. We're taking a best of breed WIP solution and we're putting it into the cloud. This is the first step. You'll see a lot more announcements about the cloudification of our WIP solution. But this is available now. And since I am doing shameless plugs, let me just do one more. And that last shameless plug will be for this. There's a new CWNA exam coming out, 108. My co-author and I, David Westcott, are working currently on the Sybex CWNA study guide. It will be available soon. Check for pre-orders on Amazon here in a couple weeks. We hope to have this available to you by Christmas time. So I want to thank everybody very much. I hope you learned a little bit more about WIPS. Just want to say in conclusion, WIPS should be in the forefront of your thinking now when it comes to your overall wireless security strategy, and WIPS is making a comeback. Thanks very much, and I hope to see you next year.
All right, and here we are with Mr. Coleman. David, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me back again.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're working you hard this week, and I appreciate all the hard work you're doing. And I do know, as you've mentioned, your CWNA book for 108 is well under development, and that's exciting. But before we get into another interesting book opportunity that's coming up, what I'd like to ask you, from your perspective, what are some of the biggest changes that have come in WIPS? You know, if we go back to the first time it was mentioned in CWSP to where we are today, what's the big thing that's changing?
I think the biggest changes that are happening right now are kind of threefold. Number one, it's going to be more affordable. It's going to be more affordable because the architecture is changing. You no longer necessarily need an overlay extra sensor. You're starting to more and more having that extra radio just built into the access points provides you that. And so it's keeping the hardware costs down. So architecturally, that's a big change. It's already been in process for a couple of years. And then the other big architectural change that is going to, I think, reignite WIPS is the movement to the cloud. And not just for my company. I mean, everybody's has a cloud strategy. But moving things to the cloud and having access to a longer timeline of the data. I know that, like I said, they're overused buzzwords, but using the machine learning to look at things like anomalies like that, to me, is just going to make WIPS security better. And then, as I mentioned in my presentation too, we have to look at these, not just the existing attacks, but we have to look at the new ones that are popping up, and most of them are coming from IoT devices. So to me, whatever RF technology they use, or wired technology for that matter, those are all potential easy entry points into your network.
All right, excellent, great information. And real quick, 30 seconds or less, you've got something coming from Extreme. Maybe something for dummies?
Yes, so thanks for allowing me to plug that. But in addition to the books that I write that are study guides for this program, I'm currently working on a dummies booklet for Extreme called, the title's not exactly 100% written in stone yet, but it'll be something like Cloud Managed WIPS for Dummies. And hope to have that out and available in a December timeframe from the Extreme website for free.
Excellent. Awesome. We'll look forward to that and get our own copy downloaded and help everybody else get theirs too. So we'll look for the announcement of that. Be ready to get it. David, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate you being here again.
Have me back next year. It was fun, and I hope next year we're doing it in Dallas, right? So hopefully we'll be able to see each other in person and actually shake each other's hands, and or at least elbow bump. So hope to see everybody there in Dallas.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, David.